purged himself? That's impossible.
Today, I'm going to get into the origin story of Marvel's Night-Stalker, Dracula, how he could make his way into the MCU, and who'd be perfect to play him on the big screen. Plus, we'll talk about Dracula's wild new blood zombie power, possibly Marvel's grossest secret ability, and whether it might show up in the MCU. Marvel's Dracula, created by Gerry Conway and Gene Colan, made his first appearance in The Tomb of Dracula No. 1 back in April 1972, with some help from co-writer Marv Wolfman. But this wasn't the first time Dracula popped up in comics. An earlier version appeared in Atlas Comics' Suspense No. 7 in 1951. At first, Marvel couldn't even touch vampire stories thanks to the Comics Code Authority. That changed in 1971 when the rules loosened up, allowing characters from classic literature to join the comic scene. Marvel quickly jumped on this, bringing us Morbius the Living Vampire in The Amazing Spider-Man, followed by Dracula in his own comic series. The Tomb of Dracula ran until 1979, wrapping up with issue number 70. Dracula also had a spotlight in Dracula Lives, a black and white horror mag running alongside the Tomb of Dracula. Initially, Marvel kept Dracula's stories separate from the superhero universe. Writer Marv Wolfman preferred sticking to pure horror vibes without mixing in capes and supervillains. But eventually, Marvel couldn't resist the crossover potential, leading to Dracula's reappearance in Giant-Size Spider-Man No. 1 in 1974. Over the years, Dracula has had quite a journey in Marvel Comics. He was destroyed by Doctor Strange's Montesi formula, but later resurrected. He starred in several series, like a 1991 Tomb of Dracula miniseries and team-ups with Blade and the Night-Stalkers. In the 2010 X-Men storyline, Curse of the Mutants, Dracula is killed by his son Zarus, who takes over as Lord of the Vampires. However, the X-Men resurrect Dracula, hoping he'll help them fight Zarus. Dracula, being Dracula, declines the offer and takes off. After his resurrection, Dracula reclaims his title as Lord of the Vampires and offers amnesty to those who had sided with Zarus. When Zarus tries to attack him, Dracula doesn't hold back. He straight up rips his son's head off. While he briefly considered turning on the X-Men, Cyclops reminded him they had possession of his body for 17 hours before reattaching his head. Cyclops hinted that they might have installed a contingency plan during that time, referencing how they had temporarily disabled Wolverine's healing factor to infiltrate Zarus' forces. Dracula suspected Cyclops might be bluffing, but admired his nerve and decided to let the X-Men go. He even returned Jubilee, who had been turned into a vampire, to their care. In the Fear Itself storyline, Dracula gets word that the Hulk, now transformed into Null, Breaker of Worlds, has landed in the Carpathian foothills after a brawl with Thor. To make matters worse, Null starts taking out vampires along the way. Dracula is shown to have Rezo Kodo and his group the Forgiven locked in his dungeon. Needing all the help he can get, Dracula releases the Forgiven and sends them to slow down Null. Meanwhile, he rallies his vampire armies for a potential last stand as Null inches closer. The Forgiven continue to stall Null's advance while Dracula readies his forces for a showdown. However, the situation is resolved when Inca, a member of the Forgiven, uses a vampire mesmerizing spell to disguise herself as Betty Ross. This breaks the Hammer's control over the Hulk, allowing him to return to normal and ending the immediate threat. Now that you know Dracula a bit, let me talk about why the MCU is ripe for Dracula's arrival, particularly as the franchise explores supernatural horror. With the success of Werewolf by Night, Marvel demonstrated its ability to merge superhero stories with classic horror themes. Dracula, as one of Marvel's most iconic horror characters, has a rich legacy, especially through The Tomb of Dracula, which introduced Blade and influenced the Marvel Universe significantly. Introducing Dracula now could expand the supernatural corner of the MCU, building on the groundwork laid by Werewolf by Night and tying into the upcoming Blade reboot. This could also draw in fans of classic monster movies and horror stories, providing a fresh direction to combat superhero fatigue. Recently, Marvel nailed it with Agatha All Along, which got great reviews and racked up some solid views on Disney+. This could be the direction they take moving forward. Plus, Ironheart is set to dive into the supernatural, featuring characters like the Hood and Mephisto. After that, Blade will be showing up in the Marvel Zombie series. Speaking of zombies, Dracula has a new, gross power, his blood zombie ability. In Blade number 6, Dracula temporarily teams up with Blade and reveals this secret move. Blade's relationship with Dracula is one of the most complicated in the Marvel Universe. They've been enemies, and at one point, Blade was the sheriff of Dracula's vampire nation. Now, Blade needs Dracula's help to take on a huge threat. To prepare him, Dracula unleashes his creepy blood zombies, giving Blade a training experience like no other. Dracula taps into his creepy blood-powered ability to create blood zombies, using them to push Blade to his limits. After watching Blade in action, Dracula critiques his fighting skills, pointing out where he can improve. For most of the series, Blade has been up against Adana, an ancient evil that Blade accidentally unleashed on the world and made even stronger. Blade and his crew had a plan to take her down with the Blade of Lucifer, but things went south fast. The weapon ends up in Adana's hands, and she uses it to open a portal to her own personal hell, plunging the world into chaos. Realizing he needs the guidance of someone who knows evil best, Blade has no choice but to turn to Dracula for help. In Blade number 6, Dracula kicks off his training with Blade by having him face off against life-sized blood blobs, which Blade slices through easily. But Dracula isn't impressed, pointing out that Blade has still failed the test. Later that night, while sitting around a campfire, Blade admits he didn't know Dracula could create blood zombies, giving a name to the creatures he fought. Dracula responds simply, "You didn't ask." This moment raises some serious questions about what other abilities Dracula might have up his sleeve, and shows his mastery of blood. As the king of vampires, Dracula has always been at the top, but his use of blood is truly next level. For example, he once used the Avengers' blood to create an army of undead. In this issue, he even uses his own blood to help Blade unlock his full potential. All of this could be really cool to see on screen, and hopefully they cast Keanu Reeves as Dracula. He's our top pick, along with Tom Ellis from Lucifer. Well, that's it. Let me know what you think in the comments below, and don't forget to subscribe for more updates on this and other exciting upcoming movies. See you next time.